The Imperial High Council convened in the Grand War Chamber of Varnock Prime, a room bathed in the cold glow of holographic star charts. Grand Strategist Vector reclined in his throne-like seat, his crimson battle robes draped over his imposing frame. His eyes, dark as the void itself, flickered with mild irritation as Admiral Zalren presented the latest intelligence. "They are human," Zalren stated, his voice laced with skepticism. "A species from the far reaches of an uncharted sector. Their fleet is advancing toward the outer colonies, but their numbers are insignificant, barely a blip compared to our forces." Vector exhaled sharply, his patience wearing thin. "Then why are we discussing them?" His fingers drummed against a polished obsidian table. "Another primitive race reaching for the stars? Have we not crushed enough of these arrogant upstarts?" "Their technology is anomalous," Zalren admitted, glancing at the flickering projection before them. "Their ships do not conform to known design principles. No ion trails, no discernible energy signatures. They move in formations tighter than any fleet we've encountered. Efficient, precise." Across the chamber, Lord Inquisitor Malzeth leaned forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it zoomed in on the fleet's recorded movements. "They fight as if they had done this before," he mused. "Yet, our records show no prior engagement with their kind." The chamber fell silent as Vector studied the display. Hundreds of sleek, black vessels advanced in a calculated trajectory, their path slicing through Empire-held space like a scalpel. Unlike the chaotic, desperate charges of lesser species, this fleet maneuvered with terrifying cohesion. There were no unnecessary movements, no wasted energy. Vector scoffed. "Let them come. We will crush them as we have crushed all others. Deploy the planetary defense network. Let them taste Imperial firepower." Orders relayed, the Council adjourned with a sense of finality. But as Zalren strode through the steel corridors of the Imperial Command Complex, unease gnawed at him. Something about this human fleet unsettled him. Days later, the first engagement commenced over the colony world of Virexia. Empire dreadnoughts form an unbreakable wall in orbit, their weapons primed. A calculated show of force, overwhelming, insurmountable. It was a tactic that had subjugated countless civilizations. Then the humans arrived. They did not slow, did not hesitate. The void itself seemed to darken as their fleet dropped from subspace, a seamless transition devoid of the usual energy flare. Their vessels, matte black and featureless, glided into position with eerie precision. Then silence. No hails, no demands for surrender. The Empire fired first. Plasma lances carved through the void, bright as newborn stars, striking the leading human vessels with pinpoint accuracy. The shot should have melted through hull plating, should have reduced the ships to slag. Instead, the plasma dissipated on impact, as if absorbed into the very fabric of the ships. A heartbeat later, the human response came. A coordinated storm of kinetic projectiles, small, dense, and impossibly fast, ripped through the Imperial blockade. Shields crumbled, armor shredded. The Empire's proud dreadnoughts, each a floating fortress, buckled under the sheer ferocity of the assault. Zalren watched in horror as one of their own, the Obsidian Wrath, fractured down its spine, splitting apart like a shattered monolith. This is not possible," he whispered. The humans did not pause to gloat. Their fleet moved forward, weaving between the wreckage with mechanical precision, pressing the attack. The Empire's defenses, once impenetrable, were unraveling within minutes. On the surface of Virexia, planetary commanders scrambled to prepare for ground combat. Soldiers reinforced strongholds, automated turrets powered up, and war machines rumbled to life. They had faced countless invaders before, but none like this. When the first human drop pod slammed into the ground, they did not arrive in chaos. They arrived with intent. Black-armored soldiers emerged, moving as one, their exosets adapting fluidly to the environment. Their weapons emitted no discernible energy signature, Yet each shot delivered devastating force. Imperial troopers fired in disciplined volleys, but the enemy adapted instantly, shifting cover, repositioning with inhuman speed. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse. These humans did not falter, did not hesitate. Every move was deliberate, every shot placed with lethal efficiency. The last transmission from Virexia's high command was brief. A single, chilling phrase before silence consumed the channel. They are not like the others. The wreckage of the Imperial blockade drifted silently in the void, broken hulls and lifeless bodies scattered across the darkness like remnants of a long-forgotten war. But this war had only begun. The human fleet pressed forward, relentless, methodical, carving a path deeper into Imperial space with the cold precision of a scalpel. On the bridge of the Eclipse, Supreme Commander Elias Mercer stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. The battle reports were efficient, clinical in their brutality. The Empire's fleet had crumbled in mere hours, their defenses overwhelmed with ease. He did not celebrate. Victory was expected. "Admiral, status on enemy reinforcements?" Mercer asked, his voice a measured calm. Admiral Calloway, standing beside him, studied the tactical readouts. Their second wave is rallying at the edge of the Trine Nexus. Heavy warships, planetary defense stations, and orbital artillery. Their command network is scrambling to coordinate. He glanced at Mercer. "They'll be ready this time." Mercer nodded. "Good." The Eclipse accelerated, leading the fleet into the next phase of the assault. The human ships moved as one, each maneuver perfectly synchronized, each strike unfolding with ruthless efficiency. There was no arrogance in their approach, no wasted aggression, only the unwavering execution of a campaign that had already been decided the moment humanity had arrived. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship Veil of Dominion, Admiral Zalren struggled to maintain order. His officers were frantic, relaying fragmented reports of the ongoing devastation. Every countermeasure failed, every strategy unraveled before it could be executed. The humans anticipated their every move, reacting faster than any species Zalren had ever encountered. "Redirect all remaining dreadnoughts to Sector Gamma," he ordered, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Reconfigure shield harmonics. We cannot keep fighting them conventionally." Across the battlefield, Imperial warships adjusted formation, prioritizing defense over offense, shifting power to their reinforced energy barriers. This time, they would not be caught unprepared. But the humans had already adapted. High-velocity railgun fire pierced through the void, bypassing Imperial shields with a precision that defied comprehension. Each impact struck at weak points, severing power conduits, detonating reactor cores. The Veil of Dominion rocked violently as a kinetic round punched through its starboard hull, tearing through decks with unstoppable force. "They're targeting structural integrity instead of shields," an officer shouted. "They're breaking us apart." Zalren clenched his fists, his mind racing. The humans weren't just stronger. They were learning, adjusting with every engagement, stripping away the Empire's defenses layer by layer. They did not fight with raw aggression like other species. They fought with purpose. On the surface of Dracona 4, the Imperial fortress world, the last of the planetary governors prepared for ground engagement. The walls of their citadel stood tall, reinforced with centuries of war-tested fortifications. Plasma turrets lined the perimeter, automated sentry drones patrolled the sky, and legions of Imperial troopers stood at the ready. They heard no dropships, no sonic booms of descending transports. Then the sky itself fractured. Human insertion pods rained down in silence, cutting through the atmosphere like obsidian daggers. They did not crash, they landed, calculated, controlled impacts, dispersing their forces with eerie precision. The first wave of human soldiers emerged, clad in adaptive combat armor, moving with synchronized lethality. Commander Varkos, overseeing the fortress defenses, barked orders to his men. "Hold the line. Do not falter." The first shots were fired. Plasma bolts surged toward the advancing humans, but their armor absorbed the heat, dissipating energy before it could penetrate. Return fire was immediate. Precision rifle rounds found their marks, striking through weak points in the Imperial ranks. Every shot counted. Every human soldier moved with purpose. Imperial walkers advanced, massive quadruple machines designed to crush enemy resistance. Their cannons roared, unleashing torrents of plasma, scorching the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed they would hold. Then the humans adapted again. Micro-drones, unseen by Imperial sensors, darted through the battlefield, latching onto the walkers' armor. EMP bursts followed, rendering the machines useless before well-placed detonations tore them apart. The humans did not celebrate their victories. They simply moved forward, never stopping, never hesitating. Varkos watched in horror as his front lines collapsed. He had fought countless wars, seen entire civilizations reduced to ash. But this was different. There was no desperation in the human assault, no sign of hesitation or arrogance. They fought like inevitability itself. The Citadel's gates burst open. The last of the Imperial soldiers made their final stand as humanity advanced without pause. There would be no reinforcements. There would be no retreat. The fortress world of Dracona 4 had fallen, and humanity had just begun. The Imperial High Council chamber, once a bastion of unshakable authority, now carried the scent of fear. The air was thick with desperation, voices strained, arguments sharp as knives. Grand Strategist Vector sat at the head of the table, his expression impassive, but his silence did not soothe the room. He listened as lesser officials bickered over the impossible. How to halt an enemy that could not be reasoned with, could not be intimidated, and most terrifyingly, could not be stopped. Admiral Zalren leaned forward, his voice measured but tight with exhaustion. We've lost Dracona 4. The outer colonies have been abandoned or annihilated. The human fleet moves with impossible precision. Every trap we lay, they dismantle before it can even be sprung. He exhaled, fingers tightening against the obsidian table. They know us. They understand us in ways we do not understand them. Across from him, Lord Inquisitor Malza tapped his cybernetic fingers against his armrest, his mechanical eye twitching. The fear is spreading beyond the battlefield. His gaze swept across the gathered officials, taking note of their nervous glances, their involuntary twitches. It's in the ranks, in the people. The soldiers whisper of shadows that do not belong, of silent ships that strike without warning. Even our spies report that those who face the humans in battle do not speak of victories or survival. They speak of inevitability. Vector exhaled slowly, his mind a fortress of logic amid the rising panic. Fear is a weapon, he murmured, but only if wielded correctly. If we allow it to fester, it will consume us before the humans ever reach our core worlds. His gaze shifted back to Zalren. Our forces still fight. The war is not lost. Zalren hesitated. He had fought in countless campaigns, had crushed rebellions with precision and ruthless efficiency. But this war was unlike any before. The humans did not fight for territory. They did not demand surrender or tribute. They advanced with the cold certainty of an executioner's blade, and those who opposed them did not live to tell the tale. The psychological cracks in the Empire's foundation were spreading. Entire battalions surrendered without a fight, defectors abandoning their posts in the dead of night. Officers executed their own men for desertion, but it did nothing to halt the unraveling morale. The stories were worse than the battles. Prisoners taken by the humans were not tortured. They were not ransomed. They were questioned, their minds studied, their weaknesses dissected. And when they were returned, if they were returned, they came back changed. They spoke in whispers, their gazes hollow, their spirits shattered. Some took their own lives. Others simply stopped speaking altogether. One such officer, Captain Varen, stood before the council now. He had been captured at Virexia and returned days later with no wounds, no visible scars. Yet he was not the man he had been. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now held only emptiness. Malzeth studied him carefully. "Tell us what they did to you." Varen's lips parted, but for a long moment no sound emerged. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "They showed me." Zalren frowned. "Showed you what?" The captain's gaze lifted, something unreadable shifting behind his eyes. "Everything?" He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. "They know us," he murmured. "They see beyond our pride, beyond our arrogance. They understand what we fear most." His voice dropped lower. "And they make us see it too." Silence stretched through the chamber, the weight of his words pressing down like a suffocating force. Malzeth leaned forward. "And what do we fear most?" Varen's lips curled into something that was almost a smile, yet held no warmth. "That we are not the gods we believed ourselves to be." The council sat frozen, the unspoken truth hanging between them. The Empire had ruled for centuries, had conquered and dominated lesser species with the unshakable belief in its own superiority. But now, faced with an enemy that defied all expectations, that belief was crumbling. Outside the chamber, in the streets of the capital, the unrest had already begun. Citizens whispered of the human fleet, of their silent advance through the Empire's strongest defenses. Propaganda messages rang hollow. Soldiers patrolling the streets carried themselves with the stiffness of men who knew they were already defeated. On the front lines, Imperial commanders sent transmissions begging for reinforcements that would never come. Those who stood their ground fell, and those who fled carried with them only more stories of unstoppable horror. The humans did not speak in threats. They did not demand surrender. They simply continued forward, and in their silence, the Empire began to collapse. Vector looked around the chamber, saw the fear etched into the faces of his fellow counselors, and understood. The war was no longer being lost in space or on the battlefield. It was being lost in the minds of his people. The enemy had already won. They were just waiting for the Empire to realize it. The last of the Imperial war fleet gathered above Corinth, the Empire's capital world, forming a desperate line against the inevitable. Their formations were tight, their weapons primed, but every officer knew the truth. They were not here to win. They were here to delay, to give their leaders a sliver of time to flee, to vanish into the distant fringes of space where the shadows of humanity had not yet reached. On the bridge of the Veil of Dominion, Admiral Zalren adjusted his stance, forcing himself to stand tall as the weight of impending annihilation pressed against his mind. Around him, his officers moved with mechanical efficiency, executing orders with the precision of men who had abandoned hope but not duty. "They're coming," a lieutenant whispered, eyes locked on the tactical display. The human fleet emerged from the void, their ships like specters against the backdrop of Corinth's twin suns. They did not rush, did not falter. They advanced as they always did, silent, methodical, patient. There was no grand proclamation, no demand for surrender. The battle had already been decided. It simply needed to unfold. "Signal all remaining battalions," Zalren ordered, his voice steady. "No retreats. No cowardice. We fight to the last." Across the fleet, officers relayed the command. There was no roar of affirmation, no rallying cry, only the quiet resolve of men who had been cornered, who had nothing left but the duty to die well. The first salvo of human weapons struck with terrifying accuracy. Kinetic rounds ripped through Imperial hulls, bypassing shields as though they were afterthoughts. Railgun fire lands through dreadnoughts, severing them in half before their captains could react. Even as Imperial cannons returned fire, human ships weaved through the chaos with impossible grace, slipping past defenses with the ease of predators toying with wounded prey. On the surface of Corinth, Grand Strategist Vector stood atop the palace citadel, his hands clasped behind his back. The city beneath him was alight with chaos, civilians desperately trying to flee, soldiers making their last stand at every barricade. The distant roar of orbital bombardments echoed across the horizon. Beside him, Lord Inquisitor Malzeth exhaled slowly. It is almost admirable, he murmured. Their efficiency, their restraint. Vector turned his gaze skyward, watching as Imperial ships fell like dying embers. No, he said. There is no restraint. Only purpose. Human drop pods descended through the atmosphere, their impact shaking the ground like the footsteps of a coming god. They landed without spectacle. And then the soldiers emerged, moving with eerie coordination. They did not revel in destruction. They did not pause to gloat. They simply advanced. Through the crumbling streets, Imperial soldiers fought with the desperation of dying men. Plasma fire lit up the ruins, but for every human soldier they struck down, 2 more replaced them, moving forward without hesitation. The sound of war filled the city. Explosions, screams, the endless rhythm of gunfire. In the final hall of the Imperial Palace, Zhao Ren stepped through the grand doors, his uniform streaked with soot and blood. He met Vector's gaze, shaking his head. The fleet is gone. His voice was heavy but not broken. It is over. Vector nodded. We knew it would come to this. Malzatha's mechanical fingers flexed slightly. Then let us meet them properly. The great doors of the palace shattered inward. Human soldiers stepped through the smoke, their weapons raised but not yet firing. A single figure moved ahead of them, tall, armored, his presence radiating the quiet finality of a guillotine blade. Supreme Commander Elias Mercer met Vector's gaze, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, the ruins of an empire settling into dust around them. Vector exhaled, stepping forward. Do you feel triumph in this, human? Mercer studied him, his eyes cold yet not unkind. No, he said. Only inevitability. Vector nodded, as if he had expected the answer. He turned his gaze once more to the burning skyline of Corinth, then lowered his head. Then let it be done. Mercer did not hesitate. The war was over. The execution was swift. The banners of the fallen empire were torn down, their once proud sigils reduced to meaningless scraps of fabric drifting through the ruined capital. Corinth, the heart of a civilization that had ruled for centuries, now lay in silence. The fires had burned out, the echoes of war fading into the distant hum of reconstruction. Humanity had won. But victory was not the end. It was only the beginning. Supreme Commander Elias Mercer stood at the highest point of the palace citadel, gazing out over the broken city. He had seen war reshape countless worlds, had watched entire civilizations rise and fall in the wake of human determination. Yet this moment was different. The empire had not merely been defeated, it had been erased. Its leaders were gone, its fleet scattered or destroyed, its people left to grasp at the uncertain future that had been thrust upon them. A voice crackled in his earpiece. The last of the imperial holdouts have surrendered. No resistance remains. Mercer exhaled slowly. Understood, across the galaxy, human forces move with the same precision that had won them the war. Former imperial territories were placed under military administration, their infrastructure stabilized, their people brought under the watchful eye of their new rulers. There were no purges, no mass executions. Humanity did not seek to exterminate. They sought to control. On the streets below, citizens moved with wary eyes, their lives no longer dictated by the iron will of the empire, but by something far more unnerving, the quiet certainty of human governance. There were no riots, no open defiance. Fear had long since been replaced by resignation. In the halls of the former Imperial Council chamber, the new order was being shaped. Mercer sat at the head of the table, flanked by his senior officers. Across from him sat representatives from the remnants of the empire, men who had once commanded fleets and dictated the lives of billions. Now, they were nothing more than diplomats, forced to negotiate the terms of their own servitude. One of them, a former Grand Administrator named Kael'vor, cleared his throat. You have what you wanted. The empire is gone. Its people are at your mercy. What now, Commander? Mercer studied him, his expression unreadable. "Now we build." Vor frowned. "You mean to rule?" "No," Mercer said. "We mean to govern." The distinction was not lost on those in the room. The Empire had ruled through dominance, through the unyielding belief in its own supremacy. Humanity had proven that belief false. But they had not come to revel in destruction. They had come to shape something new. "The galaxy will not accept human control so easily," Vor pressed. "There will be resistance. There will be order," Mercer corrected. "The war is over. We will not tolerate further chaos." Silence stretched across the room. No one doubted his words. The Empire had fought with every weapon at its disposal, and humanity had dismantled it piece by piece. There was no reason to believe any rebellion would fare differently. One of Mercer's officers leaned forward. "The people fear us. That is understandable. But fear alone does not sustain an empire. We will establish systems of governance, integrate infrastructure, and ensure stability." Vor scoffed. "And if the people refuse to accept your rule?" Mercer met his gaze. "They won't have a choice." Outside, in the grand plaza of the capital, the first of humanity's broadcasts began. Giant screens flickered to life, displaying Mercer's image to the billions who now lived under human dominion. "This is Supreme Commander Elias Mercer of the Terran Ascendancy. The war is over. The Empire has fallen. Your former leaders led you to ruin. We will lead you to order. You will not be oppressed. You will not be abandoned. But you will obey." The words carried through the streets, through the remnants of a civilization that had believed itself eternal. The people listened, some with fear, some with quiet acceptance, none with defiance. Humanity had not come as conquerors. They had come as the inevitable force that reshaped the galaxy. And now, the new order had begun.